So it's tatita, tatita, tadatita, tagitinakina, tatita, tatita, tadatita, tagitinagina, tatita, tatita, tadatita, tatita, tatita, tadatita, tagitinagina.
Hello and welcome to the Music King podcast. I'm your host Trinity Lay, and this is the second episode in our 5-part series on the tabla. In the previous episode, we introduced the background of the tabla, how it is taught and communicated, the different notes, and a bit about the different schools of tabla. For me, in piano, just like there's the German and Russian styles of piano playing, teaching, and composing, and just like the jazz in Harlem was different than the jazz in New Orleans, there are different schools of tabla that popped up around India with different regional music influences that branched off from each other in interesting ways. Today we're going to talk about the first section of a tabla solo performance, the Peshkar. But before we do that, let's go over some of the basics of Hindustani music. First, I'd like to elaborate on the idea of cycles or time cycles, which are instrumental in Indian classical music. A time cycle is less comparable to time signatures like 3/4 or 4/4, and more akin to what we know as musical phrases, with one key difference. Take, for example, a common time cycle in Hindustani music, the 16-beat time cycle, also called tintal. This time cycle is comparable to a 4-bar phrase or 16-beat phrase that you'll hear in a lot of popular music and Western classical music. For an example, here's a standard 16-beat phrase from a familiar tune. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Notice how the phrase came to an end on beat 15. Now we'll listen to a melody from Indian classical music. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how this time the melody doesn't quite end. It stretches over all 16 beats, and it kind of ends on beat 1. In Indian classical music, the end of a phrase and the beginning of a phrase will always land on the first beat of a time cycle, which is something we call the sum. This beginning and ending on the 1 is what makes it a cycle in the first place. Here's another standard accompaniment melody in 16 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. Now, not only does this melody end on the 1, but it has a lot of energy moving towards the 1. This is a common theme across all Indian classical concerts, and the process of creating energy towards the 1 or the sum can be one of the most exciting things to experience in this music. For this reason, it is important for the audience and the performers to always know where they are in a time cycle, and they have a simple solution for this. Someone is always marking time on stage during a concert, just like how a conductor marks the beats with different strokes of the baton. In a tabla solo concert, someone will be keeping time with a repeating melody, or lera, whose length corresponds to the time cycle they're playing in. Comparatively, in a vocal or instrumental solo concert with melody as the main character, the tabla is now keeping time, and they will play a certain rhythm specific to the time cycle that they are in, called the teka. The patterns, or teka, for 16 beats is this string of notes. Ta, tin, tin, ta, ta, tin, tin, ta, ta, tin, tin, ta, ta, tin, tin, ta, ta. And notice how I ended on the 1 instead of stopping at 16. There was a moment where my voice went up in pitch and the syllables became lighter. This is Kali, the section of the cycle which is played always without any bass accent. The location of Kali is different for each time cycle, and it is also necessary for the overall feel and identity of the time cycle. The teka that I just recited for 16 beats is very repetitive, so the Kali is a point of contrast which indicates where you are and also creates this wonderful, rolling, cyclic feeling that is important to this style of music. For example, in Rupak Tal, which is a 7-beat tal, Kali lasts for 3 beats. tin tinna 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 tin tinna tinna tinna. In Japtal, which is a 10-beat time cycle, Kali lasts for 2 beats around halfway through. Tinna tin tinna tinna tin tinna tinna tin tinna tinna tin tinna. And in these time cycles, each syllable is given 1 beat. Now that you understand these basics, we're going to take a look at the opening piece of a tabla solo recital, the Peshkar. I find it beneficial to compare the rules of tabla compositions to poetry due to their similar nature. And the Peshkar finds its identity in a consistent tagline. A famous work whose structure is comparable to the Peshkar is in Edgar Allan Poe's poem The Raven. Each stanza ends in the word nevermore, or forevermore, or nothing more. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, this it is and nothing more. That I scarce was sure I heard you, here I opened wide the door, darkness there and nothing more. Nothing more, evermore, forevermore, so forth. He always returns to this tagline. The Peshkar is the same way. Each stanza takes you on a journey, develops the story a little bit towards an ending or a climax, but always returns to a phrase, which is usually some form of krida dinna or da dinna. We're going to play a composition that fits within the 16-beat time cycle. We'll hear the lera, or the background melody, keeping time. You'll hear 1/4 of the composition that doesn't have any bass, and that's Kali. And every time Professor Feist plays a stanza, he'll always end on the 1 of the time cycle. And he'll always return to that one tagline.
So that's kaida material. These are called kaidas, which essentially means system of rules, because there's some rules involved in improvising on these. But what a tabla solo starts with is what's called a peshkar. There's not as many rules, and you're essentially building in imagination and in rhythmic density to an end. And that end would be one of two. An abstract ending, where you're not essentially leading into anything that's going to come after the Peshkar. I mean, there's obviously there's more than 2 probably ways to develop a Peshkar. But and what I do at my lowly state in this art is that, or you employ the notes in your improvisation in the Peshkar. Those notes you use in the thing that you're going to play after the Peshkar, or at the end of the Peshkar, if that makes any sense. So I'll switch drums here. And at first I'll play a Delhi Peshkar. So that's going to require me to put the speed much less, because Peshkars are played at a slow tempo. So this is around 45 beats per minute. The way you develop a Peshkar is essentially out of the teka. At least, again, that's one way. So for whatever I say, there's always, exceptions to this rules. And the guys who are playing at a high level, like who knows where they come up with their stuff. They're just on a different level. But for us students at a lower level, this is how we think of it. So this is a Delhi Peshkar. I'll show you sort of how it begins. And then instead of playing the whole Peshkar to the end, because these can last a half hour, I'll show you how it begins, then maybe I'll show you a middle spot of it, and I'll show you how it ends, or what you ultimately get to and what you're trying to achieve. So if we're trying to get to, let's see, that thing that I played before for the kaida, say we're trying to get to that. That's my end result. So in my head, I've already got that. That's where I'm going to end up. Mm-hmm. Okay? So this is the theme. Ta, prada dinna, tita kita ta, ta da dinna ta. So we would have so much fun with just those notes. And you noticed I even changed a little bit, played Tirakita in a different spot, even in that, just the theme. Because the themes aren't like Kaida themes. They're a little more malleable. You can move them around. As long as that vibe is there and as long as you're ending in da-da tinna, that ending has to be there. And the same with the Kaidas I was playing. Whatever the ending of the Kaida is, da-di-da-ga-den-a-gina, whatever variations you do have to end in that, essentially. So this would be maybe a middle section of this thing where you introduce what's called tisrajati, which is essentially triplets. So maybe in the middle section, and there's so many things you can do in Tisrajati. So then the section that now is going to bring us into the Dati Dage Nara Terikita Dati Dage Tenna vibe would be the introduction of the next speed higher than the triplet. So you saw that I added that small composition was in there. Dati dage nara terikita dati dage tena kena. And then once that's established, then you would go on and play all the paltas of that kaida and conclude with a tihai, which we haven't discussed yet, but I'm sure we will. So that's sort of how I do it. That's one way that I would do it. So in the parampara that I've learned, it's like this, without going into the explanation of what, you can just hear it. Let's see. Now introducing a faster, more dense improvisation idea. And then later on, this will go on, and you can play around with all these things. And then the introduction of Tisrajati, the triplets, that are faster than that sort of double speed that I was playing there. But first, I may introduce Tisra Jati in the slow, and then do the triplet. So that's bringing it to a level where you would just play in that Tisra Jati, you would play introduce and then if you introduce Tirikita, then that gets you a whole nother place.
I don't remember if it was you who described the Peshkar as an introduction of the tal, how you move in between like different...
It's not an introduction of... Well, the tal is set once you hear the nagma. Mm-hmm. Then that's actually be going on before the tabla even starts. Mm. Yeah, you play... Whatever tal you decide you're playing on that given day, that's what Peshkar you play. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you play the Peshkar for the tal. Mm-hmm.
And you always stay in the tal during a tabla solo, right?
Yeah. Now the speed can increase, but you stay generally if a guy's playing a solo in tamar, then the solo is in tamar. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they haven't progressed that far yet. Where I'm sure they could do it if they wanted to. Like every other avartan, they could do a different tal. These guys are that proficient and amazing. I'm still trying to learn just one nice one. We can contrast this tal. I can show another tal. So in that tal, essentially the teen tal, the compositions sort of mirror the tal. So teen tal is 4, 4, 4, and 4 is how it's divided. And these compositions sort of loosely fit that format. So if you're playing in a tal like Dhamar, it's different. So that's a 14-beat tal. So this is Dhamar tal. Ta, din, kridin, din, dage, titakita dage, na tin, ta, titakita ta, din. So this is actually this is called Punjabi Dhamar tal, which is slightly different than, it's I guess Sada Dhamar. The claps and the tal is the same. It's just that the teka, the notes that we play to show it, are different. Mm-hmm. So this one's ta, din, kradin, din, tage, titakita dhage, na tin, ta, titakita ta, titakita ta. Mm-hmm. And it's a cool tal in a sense, or teka, that it ends on, the beginning is ta. It's not a big explosive da or din. So I'll play a little teka first, and then the Peshkar, same way as before. that's Peshkar theme. So what you notice is that there's Terakita in that theme of that. And if you remember the tal, ta, tin, ta, titakita ta, titakita ta. There's two titakitas. So if you hear the Peshkar theme, so that's how you would start it. There was a couple variations there. And now, the introduction of Tisra Jati into this. So that was the introduction of Tisra Jati. And then where we end up in Tisra Jati, sort of even further along, would be so a little bit of the Peshkar is still there. It means the Peshkar theme. And then you lose it totally. Then you're all in Tisra Jati. So that's a little damar.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode, introducing the performance basics and introductory section, the Peshkar of a tabla solo. In the next episode, we will look at the next compositional form that is played following the Peshkar, the qaida. I know this was a lot of information to absorb, so check out our website, www.musickingpod.com, that has free, comprehensive lessons on these subjects, which include listenings and music transcriptions, and follow us on social media, also at Musickingpod. Hope to see you in the next episode.